1. What were the causes of World War II? There were many factors that contributed to the outbreak of World War II, including 1. Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I, imposed harsh reparations on Germany and reduced its military power, leading to resentment and nationalism among Germans. 2. Rise of fascism. Fascist regimes, such as Italy under Benito Mussolini and Germany under Adolf Hitler, sought to expand their territories and influence, leading to aggressive actions and military buildup. 3. Appeasement. European powers, particularly Britain and France, followed a policy of appeasement towards Hitler's aggressive actions, hoping to avoid another war. 4. Failure of the League of Nations. The League of Nations, created after World War I to promote international cooperation and prevent war, failed to effectively address aggression by fascist regimes. 5. Economic depression. The Great Depression of the 1930s weakened the economies of many countries, leading to social unrest and political instability, which provided fertile ground for the rise of fascist regimes. 6. Nationalism. Nationalism, which had been on the rise since the 19th century, led to conflicts between nations over resources, territories, and influence. 2. How did the war impact civilians and non-combatants? World War II had a significant impact on civilians and non-combatants. The war caused widespread destruction and devastation, and many civilians lost their homes, possessions, and loved ones. The impact of the war varied depending on the country and region, but some of the general impacts on civilians and non-combatants include 1. Bombings. Bombings were a common tactic used by both the Axis and Allied powers during the war. Civilians were often the primary targets of these bombings, and many cities were destroyed. The bombing of cities such as London, Berlin, Tokyo, and Dresden caused massive civilian casualties and destruction. 2. Forced displacement. Many civilians were forced to leave their homes and communities due to the war. This displacement was often caused by military actions or government policies, and it resulted in many people becoming refugees. The displacement also had long-lasting effects on families and communities. 3. Food shortages. The war disrupted food supplies, and many civilians faced food shortages and famine. The shortages were caused by a variety of factors, including military action, government policies, and transportation disruptions. 4. Persecution. The war led to the persecution of various groups, including Jews, Romani people, people with disabilities, and LGBTQ+ individuals. The persecution often involved forced relocation, imprisonment, and extermination. 5. Trauma. The war caused widespread trauma for civilians and non-combatants. Many people experienced the loss of loved ones, displacement, and other forms of violence, which had long-lasting psychological effects. 3. How did technology and weaponry evolve during the war? 1. Nuclear weapons. The Manhattan Project was a research project undertaken during the war by the United States with support from the United Kingdom and Canada. It led to the development of the first nuclear weapons, which were used by the U.S. against Japan in August 1945. 2. Radar. Radar technology played a significant role in detecting enemy aircraft and ships. It helped the Allies gain an advantage in aerial warfare. 3. Jet engines. Germany was the first country to use jet engines in combat aircraft, giving them a significant advantage in speed and maneuverability. Later in the war, the Allies also developed jet engines and used them in their aircraft. 4. Tanks. Tanks became more advanced and effective during the war, with thicker armor, better mobility, and more powerful weapons. The German Tiger and Panther tanks were particularly effective, but the Allied Sherman tank was produced in much larger numbers. 5. Submarines. Submarine technology improved greatly during the war, with longer range, faster speeds, and improved weapons. The German U-boats were particularly effective and posed a significant threat to Allied shipping. 6. Airplanes. Aircraft technology advanced rapidly during the war, with faster speeds, longer ranges, and more powerful weapons. The German Messerschmitt Me 262 was the first operational jet-powered fighter aircraft. 4. What role did women and minorities play in the war effort? Women and minorities played important roles in the war effort during World War II. With many men away fighting in the war, women took on new roles in the workforce, including jobs in factories and offices that were traditionally held by men. They also served in the military, although they were generally not allowed to engage in combat. Women also volunteered as nurses and other medical personnel, serving in both the military and civilian sectors. Minorities, including African Americans, Native Americans, and Japanese Americans, also contributed to the war effort. African Americans served in segregated units in the military, and although they faced discrimination and unequal treatment, they played a crucial role in the war effort. Native Americans served as code talkers, using their native languages to transmit secret messages that could not be decoded by enemy forces. Japanese Americans, despite being subjected to internment in concentration camps, also served in the military and played a key role in intelligence gathering and translation. 5. How did propaganda and media influence the war effort? Propaganda and media played a significant role in influencing public opinion and supporting the war effort during World War II. Governments and military leaders on all sides used various forms of media to rally support for their respective causes and to sway public opinion both domestically and internationally. One of the most significant forms of propaganda during the war was film. In the United States, Hollywood produced a number of films that depicted heroic American soldiers and demonized the enemy, while also promoting patriotism and sacrifice on the home front. In Germany and Japan, filmmakers produced similar propaganda films, portraying their respective countries as heroic and the enemy as weak and cowardly. Radio was also a powerful tool for propaganda. Both the Allied and Axis powers used radio broadcasts to disseminate news and propaganda throughout the war. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his famous fireside chats over the radio, keeping the American public informed and motivated. In Germany, Adolf Hitler's speeches were broadcast to the German people, promoting the Nazi ideology and demonizing Jews and other minorities. Print media, including newspapers, magazines, and posters, were also used extensively as propaganda tools. Governments and military leaders used posters to encourage support for the war effort and to recruit soldiers. Magazines and newspapers provided a way to spread news and propaganda to a wider audience, both domestically and internationally. Some text goes here. 6. How did the war impact the political landscape of Europe and the world? Some text goes here. World War II had a significant impact on the political landscape of Europe and the world. The war resulted in the defeat of the Axis powers and the emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as the dominant global superpowers. In Europe, the war brought an end to the Nazi regime in Germany and the fascist regimes in Italy and Spain. The post-war period saw the establishment of democratic governments in many European countries, including Germany, Italy, and France. The war also led to the division of Germany and the creation of two German states, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, and the German Democratic Republic, East Germany. The war also had a profound impact on the global political order. The defeat of the Axis powers marked the end of the colonial era and the beginning of the Cold War. The United States emerged as the world's preeminent economic and military power, while the Soviet Union became a superpower and established communist regimes in Eastern Europe and beyond. The war also led to the formation of the United Nations, an international organization aimed at promoting peace and security. The UN replaced the failed League of Nations and has played a central role in global politics ever since. 7. What were the war crimes committed during the war, and how were they addressed? The Second World War was marked by numerous war crimes committed by various nations involved in the conflict. These crimes included the killing of civilians, prisoners of war, and the mass extermination of specific ethnic groups, particularly Jews, Romani people, homosexuals, and others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. One of the most well-known war crimes committed during the war was the Holocaust, in which an estimated 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime. This genocide also targeted other groups, such as Romani people, disabled individuals, and homosexuals, among others. The Holocaust was carried out through concentration camps, gas chambers, and mass shootings. The Japanese army was also responsible for war crimes, such as the rape of Nanking in 1937, during which they killed an estimated 300,000 Chinese civilians and prisoners of war. The Japanese army also conducted brutal medical experiments on prisoners, including vivisection and infectious disease research. The Allies also committed war crimes during the war, such as the bombing of civilian populations in Dresden and Tokyo, and the forced expulsion of millions of Germans from their homes in Eastern Europe after the war. After the war, the victorious powers established international tribunals to prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. The most notable of these was the Nuremberg trials, in which leading Nazis were tried and sentenced for their crimes. Additionally, the Tokyo trials were held to prosecute Japanese leaders for war crimes. The trials helped to establish important precedents in international law regarding the prosecution of individuals for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Nazi Germany had planned to invade the United States during World War II and had even devised a plan called Operation Pastorius to carry it out. One of the most unusual weapons produced by the Germans during the war was the dog bomb, which was designed to be strapped to dogs trained to run under tanks before detonating. The Mickey Mouse gas mask was a gas mask designed for children during World War II. Though never used by the U.S. military, similar masks were used for propaganda purposes. After the German occupation of Paris, French resistance fighters launched an uprising against German forces in the city, which was later suppressed with approximately 30,000 people killed and the city heavily damaged. The British built fake cities to confuse German bombers during World War II. These fake cities were designed to mimic the real cities and were used to divert bombing attacks away from real targets. The U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, which were the first and only use of nuclear weapons in history. The Holocaust was a systematic genocide of not only Jews but also other ethnic groups, LGBTQ individuals, disabled people, and others in Nazi Germany during World War II. Military technology played a significant role in the war, with tanks, warplanes, battleships, submarines, artillery, and many other types of weapons used.